Woo. Hello. We are finally here, honey. And forever to get here. But all that matters that we are here. We are here. Welcome to my channel. Lord knows I have been trying to get here for at least 2 years. But I'm so incredibly excited to be here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Kreasha Williams, and I am here to serve you, honey. I have been on the internets probably about, how long has it been? Let's say maybe 5-6 years, from being a fashion blogger to being an interior designer to just being a creator online. But I must say that through it all, I have been of service to women and wanting to be a point of reference for inspiration, for you all to know if you see me doing it, you can do it. This is going to be a wild journey. So today on my first video ever, I wanted to just kind of walk y'all through who I am, why I'm here, and what you can look forward to tuning into here. Chapter 1, we all start somewhere. Okay, so believe it or not, 5 years ago, I had 38 cents to my name in my bank account. I literally was going through a box last year, or earlier in the year, I should say, and I found my journal, and I had a journal entry from 5 years ago, and my husband and I had 38 cents in our bank account. And that's literally all we had to our name. And in that journal entry, which I will find and insert somewhere, but in that journal entry, I was asking God to help us figure it out because we had 38 cents to our name. So 5 years ago, I had 38 cents to my name. And now my husband and I make well over $250,000. $250,000, honey, I can't even say it. $250,000 a year. We are incredibly blessed. But just 5 years ago, 38 cents. And that week, we got $20. I don't know how we got it, if it was like a refund from something or something like that, but we had $20 and we had to make it last for the entire week. So I vividly remember going to McDonald's and getting the cheapest thing that we could get to be able to eat. Lord. So anyways, here is my journey of how I've got to where I am now. I was born and raised in Amarillo, Texas. It's a small town way at the top of Texas. You probably never heard of it, or you've probably driven through it. Every time I tell someone I'm from Amarillo, they're like, oh, I drove through there one time, I think. Some people might know it. If you are a Rihanna fan like I am, honey, which I'm here for baby number 2, she stopped there, and there's a tourist attraction called the Cadillac Ranch. And she stopped there and signed the Cadillacs, which is a thing that you do. It's like they're covered in graffiti. I'll insert a picture. But that's about the only face that we've seen in Amarillo, Texas. I stayed there till 13 years old, and my mom moved us to Austin, Texas. Austin was an interesting journey because I went from living in a predominantly Black space, going to a school that was diverse. Maybe it wasn't predominantly Black as far as my school, but it was more diverse. So we had Hispanic and Black and Asian and white, and it was kind of equally spread across the board. Whereas moving to Austin, honey, she put me in, seemed like the whitest school that she could find. And that was kind of a culture shock for me. So I moved here 13, 14 years old. I went to middle school, 8th grade. 8th grade in Austin. And it was a shock for me. It took some adjusting. I did win best dressed in my high school, though. I am in the yearbook, and honey, I look a fool. I don't know who voted on that because it was not good. Anyway, so after that, I went to school at Texas State University, and that's about 45 minutes from Austin. I still wanted to be close to my mama. And so I went to school there, and I majored in fashion merchandising. The most eventful things that happened at Texas State University was that I partied a lot. I made some incredible friends that are still my friends to this day. And I also met my husband. And we'll just talk about that story another day because it's kind of interesting. It's definitely a little bit weird, but I met him 10 years ago, yes, at Texas State University. That was my first dip into entrepreneurship. So I was like, I'm going to be a personal stylist. I know I'm going to school, but I'm going to school really because my mom wants me to go to school. But I'm going to actually be a personal stylist and I'm going to be styling celebrities. So I asked my friends, I'm like, hey, can I style y'all? I'm going to put together a photo shoot. I'm going to find a photographer. I'm going to get y'all's makeup done. And I'm going to actually design the outfit. So I would go to thrift stores and I would kind of remake thrift stuff. You see that all the time now. Like, you know, these vintage stores on Instagram or just e-commerce stores that's based around vintage and thrift shopping. Honey, I was doing that in 2012. And my friends were so nice that they allowed me to style them and do photo shoots. I will insert some pictures. And that was my first dip into entrepreneurship. It didn't go anywhere. I don't think I took it seriously enough. And I don't think I really understood the amount of work that it took to actually get something like that to take off. And maybe actually being in the Austin area wasn't necessarily the area I should be in. Maybe in New York or LA would have been better for that. But that was my first dip into entrepreneurship. And really the lesson there was like, you have to start somewhere. So in my mind, it was like, I can start right here, right now with what I have. I have my friends. I know some photographers on campus. Somebody can do makeup. And I'll just find the cheap clothes because I didn't have money then. I was in college, of course, and my mom wasn't like sending me an allowance or anything. I was actually working retail. And so I decided to just start with what I had, and I put these shoots together. My friends were willing to do it. It was pretty cool when I think about it. I think it was pretty bold back then. But it didn't make me any kind of money, honey. And so I stayed in school. Once I graduated school, I actually graduated with a full-time offer from Ross Dress for Less, honey. I graduated, rewind, I graduated college with a fashion merchandising degree, business administration minor, right? And hence the styling and personal stylist. And like, so that was the closest thing that Texas State offered to like fashion design. So I was like, oh, I'll do fashion merchandising. So anyways, fast forward, I graduated from Texas State University with a fashion merchandising degree. And before I could graduate that junior year, you had to do an internship. Well, I didn't. I applied to all these internships, didn't get any calls back except for Ross. And I'm like, not Ross Dress for Less, where, honey, they got so many clothes on the floor. I feel like I'm basically digging through a mountain to just find anything anyways. I clearly did not necessarily like shopping at Ross at that time, but they offered me an internship to do a management training internship. And so I decided to take it. It's the only thing that was offered to me. And I did that. Well, I did a good job in that over the summer. So when I finished the internship, they offered me to come back as a full-time assistant store manager once I graduated. So I came back as an assistant store manager. They started me at $42,000 a year, right? They started me at $42,000 a year. And at that time, which was 2013, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much money. This is great. And also there weren't that many of my peers that were graduating with full-time offers. So I felt like incredibly blessed to even have a job offer, even though it was Ross Dress for Less. I still felt really blessed to be able to do that. So I graduated and I started working at Ross Dress for Less. Amongst that and in that time, I was like, okay, the styling thing is not working. My next jump into entrepreneurship or figuring out some kind of way to continue to express myself outside of working was while I was working at Ross Dress for Less, I decided to start to attempt to become a fashion blogger. I decided to become a fashion blogger, right? And so what that meant is I would get dressed, find like all of these really cool outfits through thrifting still. And I would go and take pictures Like way before it was a thing for you to have content shooting days and batching content and I'm doing 3 looks in a day. Let me hire a photographer. Like way before anybody was doing that, I was absolutely doing it. I was in the fields of San Marcos, Texas, a small town where Texas State University is. I was out there shooting. I had met my husband at that time, so I would pull him along. He would be so annoyed. Funny story. We actually got fleas one time because I made us go into this field to take pictures. Anyways, it's hilarious when I think about it. But with that, I was actually featured in Fashion Bomb Daily as like a up and coming fashion blogger type thing. I'll insert that somewhere, maybe here. And that was actually really cool. And I felt so privileged. And I was like, okay, I'm getting this fashion thing going. Maybe I'm not a stylist, but maybe I can be a fashion blogger. And so that was great. Mind you, during this time, I'm still working at Ross, but $42,000 wasn't necessarily enough. And my husband and I weren't financially savvy at all. So he was working like in timeshare sales and we just weren't managing our money well. So eventually my car got repossessed. I was literally sitting on the couch. And for some reason, I don't know why I ended up looking out the window. It might have been the trash people. We had valet trash at our apartment. And I end up looking at the window and I'm seeing a tow truck literally backing up to my car and hooking my car to the tow truck to tow it away. And I literally just burst into tears because I already knew. I knew we hadn't been paying the bill. It had to be maybe 3 months. And guys, at that time, my car note was $221. So we weren't able to pay that, which was absolutely crazy. And when I think about that now, it's like, what in the world? Needless to say, that tanked my credit score. My credit score was like a 5, maybe like a 516 after that repossession hit my credit score. My mother was also co-signed on that. So sorry, Mom. It also probably went onto her credit report. But that was one of the lowest points during that time in my life. But I was still carrying this entrepreneur spirit. And I'm like, I got to figure it out. Like there's some way for me to get out of working this regular old job at Ross as a manager and get into entrepreneurship. So I'm like, oh my gosh. People are always asking me where I get these outfits from, especially after I was featured in Fashion Bomb Daily. I was getting all of these messages about like, where do you get your outfits from? What thrift stores do you go to? How do you sift through things? Like, how do you determine what could be a good style, what could be not a good style? And I was like, ooh, this might be a business idea. Like, this may be something that I should turn into a business idea. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to start styling boxes. And this is before subscription boxes. But at that time I said, I'm going to start a styling business through subscription boxes, put together a website. I hired a graphic designer. I got a logo and I birthed a business called Thrift Outside the Box. And it was like, think outside the box, but thrift outside the box, because I was thrifting these looks for people. You would fill out a quiz that I had on my website that told me your style, your size, what you were interested in wearing, and you would pick like pictures of inspiration to kind of give me something to go off of. And I would build these style boxes for you, and I would send one to you a month. I did this. I launched it. Some of the biggest creators that you all may know and love right now. Actually, I reached out to them. I was doing influencer marketing before it was a thing. And I know I keep saying that, but this is 10, 12 years ago that I was engaging in these things that are so common now. So I'll insert some pictures of them in some of the Thrift Outside the Box boxes that I sent them as free promo of like, can you promote my business, promote my site? And I'll send you this free box. And they did it, which was incredible. The business, I wouldn't say it did bad. It didn't do well. I would say it did well, but I had no concept of real, like, financial, like what it costs to ship something, what packaging costs, what it costs to process returns, what it costs to have a fulfillment station, how often am I going to be able to travel to these thrift stores and actually find the sizes and find the things. Like, I underestimated the cost of everything. So I ended up actually like spending money to send a box. So I would make no money on it. And I think I was maybe selling the boxes for $49.99. So it wasn't super expensive, but it cost me more to make the box in time and effort and supplies and packaging and shipping than I was making. So needless to say, that didn't last long. Chapter 2, momentum. If you stop, you will lose it. After Thrift Outside the Box, I was still working at Ross as an assistant store manager. I think I might have got a promo and I was making like $46,000 from $42,000 a year. And I was like, okay, I got to get out of this level of retail. Like, maybe I need to stay in retail because that's all my background experience. I've been doing it since I was 16 years old. But I got to get out of this type of retail. So I actually started to apply at luxury retailers like your Pradas, your Chanels, your Gucci's, all those things. And I actually got a role and position at Prada. Now, granted, Prada started me off at $15.50 an hour. But the great thing about it is that you could make commission. So I was a commission sales associate. So I went from a store manager, because when I left Ross, I had become a store manager, to actually working at Prada as a sales associate, which you would perceive as a downgrade, right? You're going from manager to a sales associate, but actually it was a bit better because with the ability to make commission on top of an hourly rate, I ended up making a lot more there than I did at Ross. So I had to kind of take a step back to take a step forward there. But amongst that, entrepreneurship, honey, is still in my blood. So Thrift Outside the Box didn't work, right? I didn't know the expenses. Shipping wasn't shipping. The package wasn't packaging, right? So I was like, okay, I really like women, helping girls and women, but particularly girls that may have grown up like me with a single mother, that may be struggling with self-confidence and things of that nature. I always used to volunteer throughout school, in high school and in college. So I was like, what if I started a girls platform of some sort? At this time, Instagram was starting to get really popular. And I felt like teen girls needed some kind of messenger to help them to navigate like this world that we all kind of struggle in at times as women and girls. And so I'm like, I would love to help girls decide and become exactly who they want to be. Like, with no boxes drawn for them, with no barriers, with no ceilings. I would love to help inspire teen girls to become exactly who they want to be. So granted, I keep saying that phrase. And so I ended up calling the organization the Wannabes. And I actually started it with one of my close friends whom I met at Prada. She used to work at Prada as a receptionist. So she would like ring out our clients. And so she was passionate about working with girls as well. And so we decided to start the Wannabes. The Wannabes was so much fun. I will insert so many pictures here because it has really been one of the highlights of really my life and my professional career. We started on Instagram. We started just posting like positive messages to girls, and to teens. And we started using hashtags. This is when hashtags came out, and it was like a big thing for you to be able to use hashtags and actually gain followers. So we would use all these hashtags, and we would be posting things like, or we would post things like about self-confidence, about self-esteem, about cyberbullying, about your inner critic, about self-acceptance, about dating, about starting puberty, like all these things we would post on our Instagram. And she was like, my co-founder, she was like stellar at hashtags and being able to hunt down teen girls. And so the Instagram grew pretty quickly, and we're like, okay, we should transition this off of Instagram and we should start having pop-up events. So we started having events in Austin, and it was like so crazy the amount of girls that started to show up and like gravitated towards the Wannabes. We started having conferences, so we would throw mini conferences for them. We started having meetups, of course, and then we started having live events. And that was actually really cool. Mind you, we're both still working at Prada this whole time. We both found a lot of fulfillment in the wannabes, but the problem was we didn't necessarily know how to turn it into a business. When I think about it now, I know that we could have turned it into a 501c3, but at that time we didn't have that education and or that knowledge to know really that was an option to make it a sustainable business. So we continued to do it, and we did it for free. Like, we would actually pay for everything, the events, the flyers, the meetups, the supplies, the outreach. Like, we paid for everything ourselves just as a passion thing, and kind of like having confidence that it would grow into something. Granted, in the midst of this, and this momentum is building, like, I got asked to speak at South by Southwest, which was so incredible in 2017. That was dope. And I was getting asked to speak all over Austin in regards to the wannabe. So momentum is building. I'm still working at Prada, but your girl is a stellar salesperson. So I was out there making great commission checks, great bonus checks. Granted, retail life is just terrible. The weekends, the hours on your feet, the disrespect from customers. So if you are in retail, honey, I feel you. I understand. Yes, this is why I say chapter 2, momentum. If you don't use it to your advantage, you will lose it. My husband ended up getting fired from his job. And at this time, after the timeshare, he was now working as a medical sales rep. So pharmaceutical sales, which was, you would think is pretty good money. And people always like say pharmaceutical sales is so great. But it takes a minute and some time for you to build a client book and get your doctors to prescribe and stuff like that. It's like a building type of role. You have to be willing to come in and build for a sustained amount of time before you really make money in it. That's also another momentum thing and falls into this chapter. So when that wasn't happening, he started to kind of slack off in that role. Hopefully he doesn't mind me saying that. And he ended up getting fired. Well, he got fired, and granted, remember the wannabes is taking off, and I'm like, oh Lord, this is how my life is supposed to be. This is going to be my business. I don't know how it's going to make money, but I don't care. I'm quitting my job. So I quit at Prada, right? And then 2 weeks later, my husband gets fired from his job. So we are sitting in our apartment looking at each other like, what are we supposed to do? So mind you, because we put ourselves in this situation, me quitting my job and him getting fired, we lost all the momentum we were building with the wannabes, because now I don't have any money to be able to contribute to putting on these events. And my husband can also he isn't able to give me any money because he has gotten fired. So we're like, we got to figure it out. Our lease ended up just about to expire at our apartment as well. So luckily, my sister-in-law had just bought a house. Now, mind you, we're in the San Marcos, Austin, New Braunfels areas. New Braunfels, Texas, and San Marcos, Texas, they're both like suburbs of Austin, or like on the outskirts of Austin. So, mind you, my sister-in-law just bought a house, but this house is in Maryland, like the top of the United States, Maryland. And me, a Texas girl, honey, I ain't never moved out my state, honey. So the option on the table was we can move in with my sister in Maryland who just bought a house. And I'm like, but I'm doing this business. Like, I'm doing all these speaking engagements. Like, I have so much momentum with the wannabes. And it was like, yeah, but we ain't got no money. And how are we going to pay for rent? And like, your car has already been repossessed. And it was just all bad. And I would say this was self-sabotage, because I did not have to quit my job, nor did he have to get fired if he were performing well. And so we had to make the choice, and really it wasn't a choice. We had no other option. So we packed up all of our things. We grabbed a U-Haul and we drove 18 hours to Maryland, and we moved to Maryland, like literally on a whim. We might have made the decision maybe 3 to 4 weeks before we actually moved. So self-sabotage is real, and it was all up and through this chapter. Chapter 3, rock bottom is the best place to start. Okay, so we're living in Maryland, right? And we're living with my sister-in-law. She let us stay there for a while because Mike was able to get unemployment because he was fired. I wasn't able to because I quit my job. That helped to sustain us for a while, but it was only maybe like $560 every 2 weeks. So it wasn't a lot. It was enough for gas and food for us to be able to live and try to find a job in Maryland. Granted, I had to shut down the wannabes and discontinue doing all of that because, of course, I wasn't in Austin anymore. It was not good at all. Now, the person I am, I'm very optimistic, and I'm like, where there is a will, there is a way. So I vividly remember making a vision board, sitting at my sister-in-law's dining table, and I cut out all these pictures from different magazines, and I was like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to figure this out, but in 5 years, I'm going to drive this car. I'm going to have this kind of credit score. I'm going to have this amount of money in my bank account. I'm going to start at Airbnb. And what was the other thing? Oh, I'm going to be able to afford this kind of clothing and dress this kind of way. I did that as I was sitting in Maryland with no job, with no, not understanding what was going to happen. And I had faith. And I thought, we're at the bottom of the totem pole. There's nowhere to go from here except for up. So I might as well be positive and optimistic and put out there what I want. I might as well, at that time, I didn't have the word or the term manifestation. But now that I look back at it, I was absolutely manifesting the life that I desire for myself, sitting right there, not knowing how, but believing that it could come true. So granted, made that vision board, tucked it away. But then it's okay, I got to get another job. And we can't live with my sister-in-law forever and not help her with rent or anything like that. So my husband ended up finding another medical job. It was medical device sales. So it was similar to what he was doing, but kind of a higher level of sales, medical devices. And I had to go back to retail. Yes, I thought Prada is going to be my last retail job. And I didn't go to college to work retail and whoop-de-whoop, whoop, 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 honey. I went right up to Tyson's Corner, the mall. There's a Galleria mall in Tyson's Corner. It's a beautiful mall. It's huge. And I applied at all these designer stores. I ended up getting a job at Ferragamo. And they started me out at $17.50 an hour, and it was commission sales as well. And I felt so discouraged because I felt I was back at zero. I had made the progress that I needed to make with my entrepreneurship journey, but I still couldn't figure it out because I wasn't making money in any of those ways that I wanted to be or I attempted to be an entrepreneur. And here I was working retail again. Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to understand and to realize that you need to make a change in your life. Sometimes rock bottom is the wake up call that you need. And sometimes it's the call that you would never answer unless it came from you at the bottom. Or came to you at the bottom. And so rock bottom was where we were. And it's okay, we're going to work these jobs and we're going to figure it out. I ended up going into a depression because I just didn't like being in Maryland. It was so cold. I felt like the people were rude there. I'm a Texas girl. Southern hospitality is my thing. And I wanted to get back home. I was missing my family, missing my mom. And so we ended up moving back to Texas. We stayed there for about a year. I think we might have stayed there 13 months. And I was I got to get back to Texas. Granted, there's a trend here because my mom ends up buying a house. And I hit up my mom yo, I know you don't want Mike and I there because we're not married yet, because she has a thing about that. But can we just come stay there for 6 weeks until we can find a job? I got to get up out of Maryland. I hate it here. And so we ended up moving back to Texas. And that introduces me to Chapter 5. Chapter 5, prayer changes everything. Okay, so we get back to Texas and I'm okay, I am not going back to retail. I refuse. I will do anything else besides retail. I absolutely will not go back to retail. And at that time, that is literally all I had on my resume. Like every single job that I worked since 16 years old was retail. But I'm like, I have to figure out a way to get out of retail. I'm not trying to work retail my whole life. And so I just started researching online, like how to get out of retail, how to transfer retail skills into other skills, how to become, at one point I was like, I'm going to learn how to code. Like there's tech money, there's tech jobs. I should learn how to code. Granted, eventually it got to the point where I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not going to work retail, but I got to apply to somebody's job outside of retail, even if it's not tech. And so I ended up applying to a tutoring job. I got the job, but it was at a terrible school. The kids were like cursing us out. They didn't want to come to tutoring. They were like be so upset, kicking and screaming. They were 3rd and 4th graders. It was so bad, y'all. I didn't last but 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, I said, nope, absolutely not. I can't do it. I know I said I didn't want to be in retail and I'll take anything else, but not like this, Lord. Not like this. Not like this. And so I ended up quitting that job. Then I started to apply to daycares, but as a receptionist, like these high-end daycares in like Westlake, Texas, which is like the rich part of Austin. And I wasn't getting any of them. One ended up calling me back, and I went for the interview. They gave me a whole tour. Like I ended up meeting the principal and all that. So I thought it went well, because if they give you a tour after an interview, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely gonna get this job. They ended up calling me and telling me like, oh, we decided to go with another candidate, but we liked you so much, we're going to keep you in our, like if something else comes up, we definitely want to hire you. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Maybe 2 months go by. Granted, I don't have a job at this time. And I'm applying for everything. Two months go by and they call me back and they're like, oh, our receptionist ended up having to go out on medical leave and we need someone, and we would love to just offer you a second full-time position as the second receptionist at our daycare. And I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord Jesus. Like I finally am getting a job outside of retail. I don't care what it is, whatever. And we'll start you out at, I want to say $38,000 a year. So it was a downgrade from the Ross $42,000, but I was desperate. We were desperate. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. I am literally driving to the job for the first day. Music is going. I'm feeling good. It's my first day. Makeup is done. I'm like, okay, I'm about to slay this daycare job. I'm going to figure it out. I'm literally 10 minutes away and I get a call. Hi, may I speak with Miss Williams? This is her. Miss Williams, unfortunately, we had a preliminary background check done on you, but our secondary background check came back and you have had a misdemeanor theft ticket on your record from when you were 17 years old. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to move forward with your employment here. I called my husband. I was bawling, crying. I was like, what is going on in the world? Why can't I get out of retail? I'm doomed to be in retail forever. After that, I started applying to retail again. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go back into luxury retail because these people will hire me. And this is all, like, we need the money. I was driving back and forth to Houston, which is a 2.5 hour drive, going to job interviews, trying to figure out something. Eventually, I ended up getting a call from a call center here in Austin, Texas. And I applied for a call center manager role, and I go to the interview. The interview goes so well. I end up meeting with the team. Then they're like, okay, we want you to meet with the CEO. He's like usually our final pass. So he comes in, he looks at my resume, he sees all this management experience. He also kind of sees my potential and sees he kind of sees through the paper, to say, that's sort of a way to say it. Like, it's almost like he could see my potential. So he does the interview, whatever. And he's like, you are so incredible and you are going to go places. And that is why I cannot hire you and allow you to take this role. I literally almost cried in the interview because I was like, this is it. Like, I got to find something. And I felt so close to finally getting a job. And he was like, if I were to hire you, you wouldn't stay here long. And we're looking for someone who will be willing to stay here and build their career here. I mustered the strength to get out of that room. I went into the car in the parking lot. I bawled my eyes out. I felt so defeated and like, oh, now I'm too good. And now I'm overqualified. Like, what is going on? I called my husband and I was crying and it was terrible. I really felt like, what is happening? So this is where the 38 cents comes up. All that led us to 38 cents in our bank account. We ended up moving out of my mom's house into a friend's apartment that she does TV and film. So she was in LA for like 6 months. She's like, y'all can stay in my place. Just break me off like $500 a month for rent. And we couldn't even pay that. And we were scraping together to pay that. And this was the month that we ended up having 38 cents left in our bank account. 38 cents. And mind you, this is all happening while I'm going to these interviews. And this is why I'm so emotional about the rejections, is because I know how dire our situation is. And granted, my husband is also working like odds and end job. He ended up getting a job at a Gold's Gym that was opening. And that allowed us to pay rent to our friend for a couple of months, but it eventually ended. It was just a contract role. And we were back to square one, where I didn't have a job, he didn't have a job, and we had 38 cents in our bank account. And so this is where the prayer comes in, because it was like, all right, we got to go to God. Like, there is no other way for us to humanly figure this out ourselves. We have to go to God. We pulled out our Bibles. We pulled out particular scriptures that spoke to us in our situation, and we wrote out a prayer. We wrote out a prayer and we began to say it over a kind of shift-made altar. And we had this little glass container, and we bought sand from Hobby Lobby, and we would pour a little bit of sand in it every day. Like, after we said the prayer, we would say the prayer in the morning, pour a little bit of sand. Say the prayer at night, pour a little bit of sand. And it was like it was a physical version of us building our faith. Like, we were able to look at that sand and see the container filling over the days and days and days of praying. And it was like it was subconsciously building our faith in God. And we began to believe that he would pull through for us and something would come through. And so prayer really began to change things for us. Chapter 6, God's timing is perfect timing, and timing is everything. Okay, so we have went through the trenches of finding jobs, like trying to figure it out, 38 cents in the bank account. And now we're literally laying in bed and we're like, okay, Austin is becoming a tech hub. Like, we got to figure out a way to get into tech, because if we can just figure out how to get into tech is where the money is. And so we both revamped our resumes, and mine, having a lot of management experience in retail, I just started to Google like different managing positions within tech companies, because for some reason I knew like not all the people that work at a tech company codes. Like, there has to be other roles that I could easily transfer my skills into, people management and structure and strategy and operational agility and things of that nature. And so I began to Google tech jobs, and I began to take some of the language from it to be able to better inform the language that I was speaking on my resume in regards to my skills. So transferring some of my skills that I know that I had to speak the language of tech companies, so that they would actually be interested in my resume. Mind you, while I'm doing this, I'm starting to apply to tech jobs as well. Like, I'm revamping my resume, but I'm also just sending them the retail resume too, because I'm like, where there's a will, there's a way, honey. So my husband ends up getting into a tech job because he has sales experience. So it wasn't necessarily as difficult for him. He ends up getting into a tech job at a small company, but it got his foot in the door. And so that kind of gave me the belief of like, okay, if he can do it, I can do it. I'm applying to all these tech jobs. And when I tell you the rejections are coming so fast, they must have been like, honey, you got all this retail experience. What you about to do out of Google? or at a Microsoft or a Dell. Like what? Um, but one night I'm laying in bed, it's 2 a.m., and I see this position come on LinkedIn, and it's for Lyft, the driving service. And it said retail operations manager. And I said, oh, Lord, this is it. This is my role. This was meant for me. There couldn't be a better position for me or a better way for me to get into tech, a retail operational manager. And they were saying, like, we're launching these driver centers, and they're going to be retail focused, and they're going to sell swag. They're going to be a place for drivers to be able to come and hang out and get coffee and chill, recharge, like charge their phone, stuff like that, but also get their car serviced. And so I'm like, okay, I don't really want to do none of that, but this is an avenue for me to get in. So I revamped my resume. I pulled the language from the job description, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to apply for the role. I applied for the role, and then I went into the weeds of Lyft to try to find the recruiter. I ended up finding the recruiter. I messaged the recruiter on LinkedIn. I'm like, hey, I'm the perfect fit for this job. Y'all are looking for somebody with retail experience, management experience, people experience. Like, it's me. Like, pick me. There's no better candidate in Austin, Texas. And he's like, okay, I get it. I got a lot of resumes to look over. Here's the hiring manager if you want to reach out to him. So I ended up finding the hiring manager on LinkedIn, and I reached out, and I'm like, hey, this is my resume. I recently applied to this role. I want to tell you why I feel like I'm the best candidate for it. And I wrote down all these bullet points of why I'm so great and so amazing and so efficient and so operational focused, results driven. And I didn't hear anything. It was crickets. And I felt very defeated. Because I just knew that was my avenue to get in. And so I followed up with the recruiter, and I'm like, hey, can y'all just give me an interview? Like, I'm interested in just interviewing, and I just want to learn more about Lyft. And he ended up setting up an interview, and I went to that interview. It was a 3-hour interview. I interviewed with 5 people for like 20 minutes a piece or something like that. And I ended up getting the job, and the starting salary was $80,000. And I was like, I just went from 38,000 to 80,000. And mind you, this is in the midst of us doing this prayer every morning and every night, right? And prior to the prayer, I was hitting so many walls. I was feeling so much friction. And I now know that prayer changes things. And because we were so adamant about doing this prayer, and so like we were literally religiously doing it like every single day, morning and night, pouring this sand into the container, I ended up getting the interview, and I got the job, and they offered me $80,000. And that started my trajectory into tech, honey. Once I got in the door, I was like, oh, this is the amount of money that y'all paying in here. This is the skill sets that y'all need. Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna kill this. Like, and I'm not gonna be in this retail, because it was kind of like a retail type job, being that you had to be on your feet and build out these centers and like manage hourly people and stuff like that. But I used it to my advantage, and I'm like, I got my foot in the door now. Like, I'm here, and I'm going to perform well, and I'm going to stay here, and I'm also going to move up in whatever capacity. And so, yeah, now I am at one of the top tech companies in the world, one of the top 5 actually. And I lead a legal team, and it's so crazy to think that I started out in fashion, and I've landed here now making, 3, 4, 5 times what I thought that I could make when I graduated college, with that $42,000 a year job. And the moral of the story, and the biggest chapter of all of them, is to keep going. You have got to keep going. Think about all the rivers and the valleys that I have spoken about in this journey over the last 10 years. I graduated in 2013, and here we are in 2023. And my husband and I are in a completely different situation by way of the fact that we kept going. Like, there's so many times we could have stopped. There's so many times we could have just settled into, well, this is our lives, and things are just going to be hard for us. And like, those type of things don't happen for people like us. No, That's not true. That is not true. And because it's not true, I'm going to act accordingly because I know the God that I serve and that God is on my side and we have his favor. We have to move accordingly. So the biggest moral of everything is to keep going. You might feel defeated. Think about 38 cents all the way up to 300, 350, 375,000, right? Like that doesn't happen by accident. That happens by intentionality. All you have is all that you need. All that you have is all that you need to start right now. If you needed anything else, you would have it. All you have is all you need. So there's no excuse. You have to keep going. I know there's so many chapters that you just don't realize, like, when am I going to come out of this chapter? When are things going to get better? But I promise you it does. And I actually the biggest thing that I had to do was shift my mindset. My mindset had to change. I had to actually believe that these things were possible for me. I had to actually believe, like, no, I don't have to work retail for the rest of my life. I can get into tech. I can have a high six-figure, multi-six-figure job and role. And like, these things are possible for me. On that note, I do have a free 7-day audit, a ebook that I created maybe like a year and a half ago. It's totally free. It's just something that a resource that I have. I check in with you every day through email. The link to that is in my bio. And if you like this video, I would ask you to subscribe because I will be here every Monday sharing more gems with you. I am learning. I am not perfect. So I am just sharing the things that have worked for me and the lessons that I have learned along the way. I'm so excited for you to be here. I'm also very incredibly humble and excited that anyone is watching this video. So until next time, I hope you are inspired when you leave here, and I will see you soon.